In the year 400 AD, Visigoth armies swept across Italy, destroying everything in their path. The aristocrats of the Veneto region faced death or an impossible escape. They looked across the lagoon at marshy islands and shallow waters and conceived an audacious idea: build a city not beside the water, but on the water itself. The challenge was staggering. How do you build where there's no land? The answer lay in specific trees, oak and larch, chosen for their natural resins and tannins. The secret beneath Venice, those thousands of timber piles driven into the lagoon floor 1,600 years ago, still doing their job, still holding up palaces and churches and homes. They're more than just an engineering marvel. They're a metaphor for the entire Venetian achievement, taking what seems impossible, what seems destined to fail, and through systematic patient effort, through adaptation to constraints, through refusing to accept that something can't be done, making it not just work, but thrive. Venice shouldn't exist. By any reasonable measure, building a permanent city on water was madness. But exist it does, and those same wooden foundations still support it, a testament to human ingenuity and determination that continues to inspire and astound everyone who learns its secret. These woods, when submerged completely underwater without oxygen, would not rot. Instead, they would petrify, becoming harder than stone over centuries, as massive tree trunks, 8 feet in diameter and over 100 feet long, are driven vertically into the soft lagoon bottom. Wooden cranes, powered by tread wheels, lift enormous stone hammers, 40-ton blocks of granite, and drop them repeatedly onto the trunk tops. Each impact drives the timber 3 or 4 inches deeper. It takes hundreds of strikes to reach the necessary depth. The lagoon floor is soft mud and silt going down 60 or 80 feet. But beneath lies the Coranto, a compressed clay layer that will not compress further. When timber piles penetrate this layer, they stop sinking, but driving piles was only the beginning. After vertical trunks were cut level just above the waterline, the gaps between them, 6 inches to a foot wide, had to be filled. Workers drove smaller alder wood stakes between main piles. Then came limestone powder. Mixed with water and compressed into gaps, limestone creates a cement-like substance that hardens, binding everything together. More importantly, it makes the entire foundation behave as a single unified mass. The timber foundations, though solid, needed refinement for permanent architecture. Far from the lagoon, massive limestone quarries operated continuously in the surrounding mountains. Workers using iron wedges and wooden mallets split stone along natural bedding plains, extracting rectangular blocks weighing 200 to 300 pounds. These were rough-shaped at quarries, loaded onto sledges, transported to docks, where cranes lifted them onto barges. The journey to Venice took days. At foundation platforms, blocks were unloaded and stockpiled systematically. Installation required meticulous preparation. Workers spread a 2-inch layer of fine limestone sand across the timber surface. This sand created an adjustable bed, allowing precise positioning. When a block was placed, sand could be added or removed underneath, achieving perfect levelness despite irregular timber below. 2 workers carried each block using wooden poles, rope slings suspending the stone between them. They'd lower it onto prepared sand. Immediately, a master mason checked alignment using wooden straight edges and water levels, transparent tubes with water showing true horizontal. If the block sat slightly wrong, he'd tap corners with a small mallet, adjustments measured in millimeters. Each block had to be perfectly level and aligned with neighbors. Blocks were laid in running bond pattern, each offset half its length from stones above and below, distributing stress and preventing crack lines. Joints between stones were kept incredibly tight, just 2 or 3 millimeters, filled with lime mortar. This mortar was crushed limestone mixed with lime and water, hardening into cement-like substance. It wasn't as strong as modern cement, but was remarkably durable and slightly flexible, allowing foundations to move minutely with tides without cracking. Stone laying progressed systematically outward from central points. Teams worked coordinated. Some prepared sand beds, some carried stones. Masons positioned and adjusted, assistants applied mortar. A productive day might see 80 blocks laid, creating 200 square feet of paving. The scale was staggering. Early Venice encompassed millions of square feet. Stone paving took decades, section by section, as resources allowed. As stone surfaces expanded, buildings emerged. The merchant aristocracy brought wealth and knowledge of Roman engineering and Byzantine aesthetics. Guilds formed, master craftsmen who served 7-year apprenticeships learning their trades. Stonemasons knew how to cut and join stone into walls lasting centuries. Carpenters understood timber framing, roof structures, floor joists. Bricklayers fired clay into terracotta bricks and constructed strong, lightweight walls. These guilds collaborated, combining skills to create distinctive architecture. A typical building began with stone foundation walls built directly on paved platform, using large limestone blocks with lime mortar, creating walls 4 to 5 feet thick at base. These distributed building weight across many underlying timber piles. Walls rose 8 to 12 feet for ground floor, incorporating large arched openings, portals 8 to 10 feet tall, serving as commercial spaces or water-level loading docks where boats delivered goods directly. Above ground floor, construction shifted to brick. Terracotta bricks fired in kilns, lighter than stone, easier to work with. Walls rose 12 feet for second story, 12 more for third. Wealthy buildings reached 4 or 5 stories, towering 50 feet above stone plazas. The style was uniquely Venetian, fusing influences. From Byzantium came love of arches, domes, decorative mosaics, rich colors. From the Islamic world came pointed arches, geometric patterns, buildings as decorated art. From Roman heritage came engineering principles, importance of foundations, use of mortar, understanding of arches and vaults. Facades were painted vibrant colors: ochre, burnt orange, terracotta, cream, creating patchwork reflecting in canal waters. Windows were elaborate arched openings with carved stone surrounds, often grouped in 2s or 3s. Balconies projected from upper floors on wooden beams or stone corbels, enclosed with wrought iron railings featuring scrollwork. Roofs were curved terracotta tiles in overlapping rows, shedding rain efficiently. Venetian architecture adapted to water. Ground floors were commercial or storage, spaces tolerating occasional flooding. Living spaces began on second floor. Many buildings had direct water access, platforms where boats could moor, functioning like driveways. Foundation walls were extra thick with waterproof lime mortar and careful drainage. Interior ground floors had channels allowing water to flow out if it entered. The Venetians accepted occasional flooding as manageable rather than catastrophic. As buildings multiplied organically wherever foundation space became available, they created clustered neighborhoods. Buildings pressed tight, separated by 5 to 10 feet, sometimes sharing walls. The spaces between became narrow alleys called calli, often 6 to 8 feet wide, creating shaded corridors where upper balconies nearly touched overhead. Overseeing all this was a unique government structure. Venice was technically a republic, but not a democracy in the modern sense. Political power rested with the merchant aristocracy, families whose wealth and lineage granted them seats in the Great Council, the legislative body that made major decisions. From the Great Council, a smaller Senate was elected to handle day-to-day governance. And at the apex was the Doge, the Duke, elected for life from among the most prominent families. The Doge was not an absolute monarch, but a first among equals, his power constrained by complex checks and balances. He couldn't make major decisions alone, couldn't spend significant money without council approval, couldn't even leave the city without permission. This system prevented tyranny, but also created a stable governance structure that lasted nearly 1,000 years, remarkable in an era when most governments rose and fell within generations. The government was intimately involved in economic life. They regulated trade, enforced contracts, maintained the arsenal, the massive state shipyard where galleys were built for both commerce and war. They also handled justice, operating law courts that were surprisingly sophisticated, with written legal codes, formal procedures, and an emphasis on evidence rather than simply noble privilege. Of course, if you were wealthy and well-connected, justice favored you, but the very existence of formal law was progressive for the era. Religious life was inseparable from civic life. Venice's patron saint was Mark the Evangelist, whose remains were supposedly smuggled out of Alexandria in the 9th century and brought to Venice, making the city a pilgrimage destination. The Basilica di San Marco, St. Mark's Basilica, became the physical and spiritual heart of the city. Its construction, beginning in the 11th century, showcased everything Venice had become, a fusion of Byzantine, Islamic, and Western architectural styles covered in golden mosaics imported from Constantinople, filled with treasures looted from the Fourth Crusade, a building that was equal parts church, treasury, and statement of power. But religious life wasn't just about grand cathedrals. Every neighborhood had its parish church, often built by a wealthy family as both an act of piety and a display of status. These churches served as community centers, places for worship certainly, but also for social gathering, for marking life's major events, for reinforcing neighborhood identity. Guilds had their own churches or chapels where members would gather, where patron saints specific to each profession would be venerated. The stonemasons prayed to Saint Stephen, the glassmakers to Saint Luke, the gondoliers to Saint Christopher. Religion structured time. Church bells marked the hours. Saints' feast days provided holidays. Religious festivals punctuated the year. The most famous was Carnival, the carnival before Lent, when Venetians would don elaborate masks and costumes, temporarily erasing social hierarchies in days of celebration. But there were dozens of others. Feast days when neighborhoods would process through streets carrying religious icons, when special foods would be prepared, when work paused and community took precedence. This interweaving of commerce, governance, religion, and daily life created a culture that was distinctly Venetian. They were pragmatic and devout simultaneously. They traded with Muslims and fought them, sometimes in the same decade. They were republicans who created a hereditary aristocracy. They built a magnificent city on utterly impractical foundations and made it work through engineering ingenuity and sheer stubbornness. They took the worst possible circumstances, refugees fleeing barbarian invasions, building on marshy islands in a lagoon with no solid ground, and created what would become, for several centuries, the wealthiest and most powerful city-state in Europe. The secret beneath Venice, those thousands of timber piles driven into the lagoon floor 1,600 years ago, still doing their job, still holding up palaces and churches and homes. They're more than just an engineering marvel. They're a metaphor for the entire Venetian achievement, taking what seems impossible, what seems destined to fail, and through systematic patient effort, through adaptation to constraints, through refusing to accept that something can't be done, making it not just work, but thrive. Venice shouldn't exist. By any reasonable measure, building a permanent city on water was madness, but exist it does, and those same wooden foundations still support it, a testament to human ingenuity and determination that continues to inspire and astound everyone who learns its secret.